Let us begin to study the poem Elegy written in a country churchyard in detail. Let us read the first stanza. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly over the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Now, in the first three stanzas, the poet describes the churchyard in the evening. Let me give you the meanings of some of the words. The word curfew is not used in the way we use the word now in the present time, but it has a similar connotation. It signals the end of the day. So curfew was the name of the evening bell, which was rung at about 8 o'clock as a signal for putting out fires. And it was a custom introduced in England by William the Conqueror. But here it means simply the evening bell in the church. The word tolls is used for the ringing of church bells. Knell is the bell rung at a funeral. Day, if you notice, is spoken of as dying. And the curfew is represented as the funeral bell rung in honor of day's death. Here, the departing day is compared to a dying man. Parting, dying. The lowing herd winds slowly over the lea. Lowing is the sound made by cows. Herd is the word used for cattle. Wind, it's not wind, it's wind. Wind means to walk in a zigzag manner. And lea is a word for meadow. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way. The ploughman, the farmer, plods. Plods means walks heavily. Weary way, his weary way. This is very interesting. And it is an instance of transferred epithet. It is not the way that was weary, it was not the way that was tired, it was the farmer, it was the ploughman who is tired after a day of hard work. And leaves the world to darkness and to me. The world, that is all the surrounding countryside. As if the whole hemisphere is plunged in darkness on the setting of the sun. And to me, that is, solitude that follows the setting of the sun is in harmony with me. Gray speaks of the ploughman, but in fact it is a personal remark which conveys that darkness is pleasing to the poet. Solitude is pleasing to the poet. So there is an autobiographical touch given by the poet here as he mourns the death of his aunt alone in the churchyard. So what the poet says here is that the day is done, the evening has approached, the cattle are returning home from the meadows and they move slowly in a zigzag line. The farmer, who has been hard at work during the day, is walking heavily towards his home, and as he walks, darkness follows over the surrounding country, followed by solitude, very harmonious to the heart of the farmer as well as the poet. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight. and all the air a solemn stillness holds, save where the beetle wheels his droning flight, and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight. That is, the landscape becomes dim and indistinct to view. Glimmering, faintly dim in the twilight. Landscape is another word for scenery. And all the air, that is the whole atmosphere, a solemn stillness holds. Solemn stillness, silence such as dispossesses the mind to meditation and suggests serious thoughts. Holds means fills. Save where the beetle wheels his droning flight. Save, except where? Except in those spots where. Beetle is a kind of a dark colored insect which makes a humming sound. Wheels his droning flight. Wheels means makes circles in the air. And droning, humming. And there were exceptions to the general silence. The humming of the beetle and the tinkling of the sheep bells and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Drowsy tinklings, the sound of bells heard at irregular intervals, indicating that the sheep round whose neck the bell is tied is falling asleep. Lull, put to silence, put to sleep. Folds is a word used for sheepfolds, that is enclosures where the sheep are kept at night. So the poet continues to describe the surrounding scenery in the evening. And he says that the scene, the landscape, begins to grow dim and indistinct to view in the evening twilight. And everything around is perfectly calm and quiet, except for a few sounds, such as the humming of the beetle as it makes circles in the air, the sound of the bell tied to the neck of the bellwether, ringing at irregular intervals and in a dull, monotonous manner away in a far-off sheepfold. Save that from yonder ivy-mantled tower, the moping owl does to the moon complain, of such as wandering near the secret bower, molest her ancient solitary reign. Save, except yonder, the hooting of the owl is heard from amid some old ruined tower covered with ivy. The poet represents himself here as actually seeing the ivy-mantled tower. Ivy-mantled, covered with a creeping plant that grows on old ruins. Mantle means a cloak or a robe. Ivy is compared to a cloak in which the tower is dressed. Moping, fond of gloom and solitude, in a depressed, spiritless state. To the moon complain. The complaint is one of trespass, and it is made to the moon because she is the queen of night. The owl generally hoots most on moonlit nights. It is the fashion with poets to associate the owl and the moon in various ways. In classical poetry, the moon is conceived as the lover of the owl. Secret bower represents a hidden nest. Molest means disturb, and solitary reign because all is lonely. The tower is conceived as a kingdom in the undisputed possession of the owl. In this picture, we have a suggestion of a deeper shade of growing nightfall than in the preceding one. So what the writer is saying here is that the only other sound that breaks the deep silence is the hooting of the owl from the top of the neighboring church steeple overgrown with ivy, where the owl has her nest. The owl is spoken of as the queen of solitude, making a complaint to the moon against those passers-by who, by walking near her concealed nest, her hidden nest, her secret bower, so the owl, as I was saying, is spoken of as the queen of solitude, making a complaint to the moon against those passers-by who, by walking near her concealed nest, break in upon her privacy or encroach upon her dominion. This means that the owl hoots whenever she is scared by footsteps of any intruder who may happen to disturb her. So the poem begins by describing the approach of evening with its darkness and its silence, which is unbroken except for some such sounds as those of the droning of the beetle, the tinkling of the sheep's bells, and the hooting of the owl. This darkness is conducive to mournful thoughts. In the next stanza, we'll see that the poet proceeds to speak of the poor people.